I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel like we're in prison. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. I'm ready to be unleashed as fuck. Tired of the madness, done with the sadness. Gonna break free and be unleashed.
Hello, take two. So, I don't know if you were here for the first episode just a few minutes ago. We're having a pretty bad storm over here and lost all the power. Hopefully, we're going to keep on going. But hello and welcome to hopefully all the way through the episode this time, another empowering episode of Unleashed AF, the podcast where we help you to step into your greatness and into your authentic self using your power voice and all the other things that you have that are just badass about yourself. I'm your host, Deidre Beecham, and my co-host, I don't know why I said I'm the host, I'm a co-host, and here's my co-host, Jenny Baddick. I'm Deidre Beecham, and I help women, high-achieving women, to obliterate their nice girl training and to step into their authentic self. And Jenny Baddick, what in the world do you do?
Well, I help people engineer their inner space to create the life they want.
Awesome. And we're here every single week. Very excited to be here with you. Today, we're going to be talking about voting rights. And as always, please, we love hearing from you. So don't hesitate to drop your thoughts or questions in the comments area or a chat. We're happy to chat with you. Also, we have a section on our website. Our website is unleashedafpodcast.com, and you can go there. We have a section called WWJDD. What would Jenny and Deidre do? No telling.
Yeah.
we are happy to help out in any way we can. We have, oh my goodness, I need to start putting this in my intro. We were making adjustments. My wife and I were making adjustments to that website. I have over 30 years of experience. Combined with you, I think we probably have pretty close to a half of a century of experience between us that we can help you with. But today, we are going to be talking about voting rights. I mean, we just had the celebration not that long ago, 105 years of women with voting rights. Is that correct?
Just about, yeah. It was 1919 is when Congress voted it in. It got ratified in 1920. And this past Monday, was National Women's Equality Day to celebrate that amendment, which is the 19th Amendment to our Constitution, which gave women the right to vote.
Yeah, and it's crazy that first of all, that we didn't have voting rights to begin with. I mean, of course, people of color didn't have rights to vote. It was just ridiculous. It was all white men, and that was it. And I know there's a great push to get us back to there, which we are prayerfully not going back. But that really takes a combined effort, a concerted effort, all of us going out and saving this democracy. Every time I say it's a democracy, they're like, it's not a democracy, it's a republic. Okay, all right, yes, I get it. I'm not trying to argue.
It's a democratic republic.
But you still have to go out and vote. Okay. Yeah. Because we can lose these rights. And we've seen time and time again how we lose rights. Even right now, I think in the last 10 years, there's been almost 100 restrictions to our voting rights across the country, which is absolutely crazy. So it's really a great thing to talk about. Where do you want to start us off, Jenny? Where are we starting?
Well, I mean, I think just some general concepts. We've talked several times on the pod about the patriarchy being an issue and things like that. But, in addition to, obviously, this country was started by a bunch of men, right? And it's hard for me sometimes to think of it as being white men because I love Hamilton the musical, and those are all people of color. So I think of all those people like, wait, there were all these people of color. Like, no. That was different than how it actually was. But yeah, they were I mean, as much as they were, really bold to try to break away from the British government and create our own sovereign nation, they also, as they were making the rules and the laws for it, made sure that part of what was going to stick was those that fought for it were going to be able to stay in control of it and in power of it. And I think that's part of what kind of kicked off that patriarchal thing in terms of our laws in this nation. It wasn't because part of what it was trying to get away from was religion being incorporated, right? That was one of the reasons that they wanted to break away from the British monarchy. And so we can't really say that it was because it was a religious suggestion, because they were trying to break out of that completely. It was still a power thing. So we're the men, we know what's up. We're the ones that need to stay in control. Nobody else that looks different or sounds different or whatever, we know that we can handle it, and we don't trust anybody else to.
True, but at the same time, while there may not have been a religion per se constitutionally, each person came with their own, philosophy or religious backbone that they brought with them, and in the course of that, a lot of denigration of women and anybody that wasn't the white male.
Yeah, societally, they were there because of those other influences. They didn't incorporate religion specifically into the laws, but it was definitely influenced.
It certainly influenced
society in general.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even calling people of color 3/4 of a person or 2/3 of a person, or all of, and of course, a lot of that was based on what at the time people would say, well, it's biblical. Oh, okay. I love how we like to use the Bible to uphold injustices. That just drives me insane. Or to uphold what is right and what is wrong, which is crazy because there's so many things that, anyway, that's a whole nother topic. That's a whole nother section. But yeah, so I know when I was doing my research for this, we knew we were going to talk about voting rights. And I was trying to figure out, well, why have so many, I mean, yes, we're celebrating that women can now vote. That's fantastic. And it's been over 100 years. Great. Why do we keep hearing about, I know I do, I keep hearing about voting records being purged. I keep hearing about people not being able, or voting registration places being shut down, that access to voting booths had been greatly limited. There are places that people can't, that need transportation to get to a place. They're shutting down voting places in those areas and moving them. And I was like, well, why had there been this rampant push, or how has it been allowed? Because that's been the craziest thing. I don't know about for you, but for me, it's been like, well, why do we keep hearing about this? Why do we keep hearing that voting rights are an issue, or what is happening that we need to keep fighting for them? And so in my research, I found the answer, and it's happened in certainly both of our lifetimes, but in 2013 is where the big one happened. And in 2013, in Shelby County versus Holder, in that particular case, it took away Congress's ability to have a check and balance system on the states and jurisdictions. Because prior to that ruling, any state or jurisdiction that had a history of voter suppression had to go to Congress to change any of their voter laws. And in 2013, Shelby County versus Holder, that ruling obliterated that. And that from that point forward, it was like, no, we don't care anymore. Even if you have this voting history, we're not going to, from a federal standpoint, rule on this. And so since then, almost 100. I mean, you can see why this would be a problem. That suddenly all of these states and jurisdictions that want to restrict voters now have free reign. And it's been tested over and over again. There have been people and said, yeah, but this is crazy. You can't put this law in place. And they've taken it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's like, Shelby County versus Holder. So it's just absolutely insane. And so I don't know. You have any thoughts about that? I was flummoxed and flabbergasted, and I understand now why for years now people have been saying we've got to bring the Voter Rights Act back and put that in place and get rid of these things. I just didn't realize it was this bad. And maybe that's just lazy white person, but I was very, very unaware, and I'm a little angry that I was so unaware. I mean, we shouldn't have to fight for our rights to vote. This is the craziest thing, that in 2024 that there are places where it's becoming more difficult to vote.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not sure what it was that would have triggered that 2013 thing. I don't recall exactly what was going on at that time that would have kind of led to that decision, or why that case was even brought up. But the thing I've thought more recently in terms of people being concerned about, you gotta, protect our rights. They're trying to take our rights away. I think a lot of that got drummed up by the whole election stolen, our voting isn't, secure and accurate anymore, that whole storyline. And so I think from that perspective, it seems like they're trying to take away many of the opportunities that made it more convenient for a lot of people to vote, simply because they weren't ways that they could be in person signing the sheet right in front of somebody, knowing that that's the person and their ID and all this other stuff. Because that's part of the proposed how things get corrupted and fake elections and stuff like that. I think that's part of what has gotten stuff more recently to start shifting and moving, and taking away opportunities for people to vote remotely and stuff like that. Not any one particular class, but it turns out that it ends up being kind of discriminatory based on, there's certain people that can't afford to go to the polls, so it does discriminate against certain groups. Although military is not going to be able to be there in person to vote either, and you'd be hard
See, and
pressed.
that's why to me it's a false argument.
Hmm?
That's why to me it's an absolute false argument. When people say, well, we don't want you to be able to write in your vote, and yet, presidents do it, our military, our entire military does this.
Yep.
And so that's a false argument. And then the
Agreed.
whole thing of taking booths out of areas where people could walk to them, and now they've moved them to other places. You can't tell me that isn't calculated. I just have a really hard time believing that that's not calculated, because these places where the voting booths get taken away are places where people have lower income, and don't necessarily have the ability to hop on a bus or get in a car and get to a voting booth. So it's something absolutely has to change. I just think it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I wasn't agreeing with those reasonings. I just think that's the excuses that are being given for the more recent stuff, which I agree with you. I think is not without some intention in terms of how they're coordinating things.
Yeah, I went and looked, because when I saw that it almost 100 pieces of legislation had been enacted since that ruling, since 2013, that make it more restrictive for people to vote, I was feeling really discouraged. I really was. I was feeling really discouraged. And the beautiful thing is, because I always think there's a silver lining somewhere. it's never all darkness. It's just not. And so I kept searching and I kept looking, and I found this website, and it's called the Brennan Center for Justice.
Hmm.
And I'm sorry, I don't know a whole lot more about them except their name, but it's the Brennan Center for Justice. And this was from 2023. And this is really interesting because for 2023, according to this article, it says 14 states enacted laws to make it harder to vote, 23 enacted laws to make it easier. So there is a tide turning here.
Okay.
Because the worst, evidently, sorry, my house just shook. It's really storming badly here. Sorry. In, what was it, 2020? No, yeah, 2021 was the year the most number of restricted laws were passed across the country was in 2021. 33 restrictive voting laws were passed. So the beautiful thing is there is a fight back. There are states that are taking a stand and making a difference. And it is nice to see that there are more states enacting expansiveness to the voting rights than there are restricting. But they shouldn't be restricted. That's the crazy
Right.
thing. They shouldn't be restricted. The only reason to restrict them is some power grab.
Yeah.
That's the only reason for that.
Yep. Agreed.
We should all be able to get out and vote and have things change for the better, or at least
Yeah.
the way we think that they're going to be better.
Yeah. And I mean, it bugs me when I see people that are being interviewed or whatever talking about how there's not even, you don't even need to have an ID to vote. And I'm like, how is that? What are they even coming up with that? Because you do have to show ID when you go vote in person. So the only thing they can be kind of referring to there is mail-in stuff, or if there's a drop box or something that's unmanned. Obviously, in that case, you don't have to show ID. But I believe every ballot is designated for a certain person or something, right? I mean, it's
There is, and here's the thing: you used to not have to show your ID in person. I mean, I remember going to the polls, and you didn't have to show your ID. You just told them your name. They had a list. Your name's only on there once. You told them your name, and then you had to verify your address,
right.
and that you were in.
Mhm.
And then the right and the cry against illegal immigrants, which again is another false flag in my opinion. But oh my god, my house just shook again. It's a really bad storm. Sorry. Where were we?
The showing ID and
Oh yeah.
to go vote
And
in
so
person.
because of illegal immigrants, we're going to make you show your IDs now. And it's crazy because there are people that don't have IDs that are perfectly legal. But again, a lot of these are just false flags. And if we would just have the Voters' Right Act and everybody who is an American citizen has the right to vote, it's automatic. Other countries do it. It's ridiculous that in this day and age, it's not automatic.
Right.
It just makes no sense.
Yeah.
Unless you put into the fact that there's control in place.
Yeah. I mean, even if they wanted to issue a separate voter ID card that could only go to anybody who was registered, had all the qualifications to be able to vote, fine. I don't care.
Yeah, that's fine. As
And
long as it's automatic. That's awesome. Great.
yeah.
Let's do it.
And have them attach a coupon or something that could only come from that card, if they can't go in person, just they have to attach something or put some special number on it. I mean, social security numbers are individual. They can't have multiple people with the same social security number. So even if something like that was on there,
social security number, you should have a voter card. There's your voter ID right there.
Right.
I don't know. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
But let's talk about other ways that people try to suppress our vote, because And again, this isn't all about suppressing vote. There are things that have been done to help allow people to vote, and the states are expanding rules and laws. And the biggest thing is getting out there and voting.
Yeah.
Just getting yourself out there and voting. But I would love to take a moment to talk about a situation that has happened to me, and I would be shocked if I'm the only one, because I know this happens to a lot of people in my own church, and I'm sure other churches it happens to, which is voter suppression from the pulpit. And I don't know if you've had any experience with this, Jenny.
I have not.
Thank God. In the church that I belong to, now I used to belong to, years ago, I belonged to the San Diego Church of Christ, which is part of the Boston ICOC, which at one point was considered a cult and was put on 2020. So I was in that. And from the pulpit, a preacher would come up, and this was every single time there was an election, and it didn't have to be a major election. It could be a local election, but anytime there was an election, any sort of vote, every single time there was a sermon to ensure it was never flagrant. It was never, you need to make sure you vote this way. It was never that. It was that's how they would skirt around the law, which not all churches care anymore, but that's how they would skirt around the law of the separation of church and state, and that the preacher is not supposed to, or church should not tell you who to vote for. But that happens all the time. But what they would do is would preach about how a house divided does not stand. And it's really important, women. It's really important, women, that you vote with your husband. Why would you cancel his vote? Is that love? You love your husband? You know, in the Bible, it's God first. Husband, wife, children. So just as your husband must listen to God, you must listen to your husband. And you may think to yourself, nobody's going to know what I'm voting behind the booth. God knows. And again, a house divided does not stand. And so, I mean, it's much longer than that.
Yeah.
But that is it in a nutshell. That has been my experience. I know that can't possibly be the only church that ever does that.
I'm sure.
And it was very disheartening for me and confusing as a woman. Now I don't go to church anymore. It's not my belief. But at the time, I felt incredibly torn by what I knew or what I believed was the best decision for me to make for the benefit of me and my family and my future. And my husband would want to vote another way. And what do? Do I vote my conscience? Which means I would also be voting against God, because if I vote against my husband, I'm voting against God. And it's such a mind fuck to put people into.
Yep.
And so bringing this up partially because you saw some. So talk about what you found when you were in social media.
Yeah, I've seen a few times over the last few weeks some suggestions that were like a meme, I guess, basically, or a picture that said, women all over the country are now carrying little Post-it notepads in their purses so that they can put little Post-it notes on the inside of bathroom stalls that say something like, "Your vote is private. vote for Harris or something, it doesn't have
or
to be
just
exactly
vote.
that.
They won't even say, and some of them I've even seen that don't even say vote for Harris. They're like, vote your
Right.
conscience. Your vote is private.
Right. Yeah.
No one needs to know. And
Right.
the reason I wanted to bring this all up about church is because yes, that's true. But then when you leave, here's the dilemma that women have. Women that live in religious, far right religious households. Here's the
Mm-hmm.
dilemma. So yeah, I could vote who I want to, but then my husband's going to ask. My
Mm-hmm.
husband's going to ask.
And do I lie
So
to him?
do I lie to him? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it really messes with women. They can't win in those types of situations because if they
Yeah.
vote their conscience and vote who they want to, who they know is going to lead them to a better life, or in agreement with what they believe, then they may have to go home and tell their husband, and their husband, because they always say you don't have to tell, but the husband's going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
The husband's going to ask. And so do you say what you did and then get in trouble from your husband?
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I'm talking this way because I used to think this way. I'm going to get in trouble from my husband, or I need to ask my husband for permission because everything had to come from him. And so if you're in that type of a church situation, a religious situation where you're being forced, I mean, how do you even deal with it? And I don't have an answer. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'd love to discuss this with you, Jenny. I mean, do you
Yeah.
have an answer? What would you say to somebody if a woman came to you and said, "My husband is a Trumper. I'm still trying to figure out how I'm staying with him, but hey, I'm staying with him. I'm making shit
He
up,
does
people.
have some redeeming
Does have
qualities.
some redeeming qualities. He's a good father. He just has the wool pulled over his eyes because Fox News has a hold on him. But I love
Right.
him dearly, and I want to vote for Walls and Harrison Walls. And but what am I going to do? Because yeah, that's true. I could get behind the booth and I could vote Harrison Walls and I could vote blue all the way down the ticket. I could vote all the things for my rights. But when I go home, my husband's going to ask me who I voted for. When we get out in that car, my husband's going to ask me who I voted for. And if I
Mm-hmm.
lie, he's going to know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I feel for anyone who's in that kind of situation where they don't feel like they can have their own opinion and be allowed to have their own opinion, even if it's different from their
Mm-hmm.
husband. I absolutely feel for those people. Some of them, I think, are aware that they're kind of stuck or they're in a situation where they're not allowed to do that. Others, I think, give into it without even really questioning it. So they just think they're doing the right thing and they just go with it. I feel for them too,
Yeah,
um,
I do too.
in a different way.
Yeah.
It's just old thinking. It's
Yes,
outdated,
it's
antiquated.
very, very outdated thinking. One of the ways that my husband and I finally got past this, obviously we're divorced, so we didn't completely get past everything, but but one of the ways that we got past this is because we would have, kind of back and forth, and I would never say, "Hey, I'm going to vote differently than you."
Mhm.
But what we would do is say, "You know what, we're going to agree that once we get to the voting booth, that's it. We go and vote and we just don't talk about it. We're not going to discuss it.
Yeah.
We go
Yep.
in, we vote, we come home, and then we go do stuff." And that way we weren't discussing it, and it didn't put me in a position where I felt uncomfortable. But that's not going to work for everybody. And we're not going to
Absolutely
be able
not.
to solve the all of the women's issues right now in the
Right.
world. But that is one, and I just want to say that I recognize it.
Yeah.
I recognize that that's out there. And for those of you that can potentially put that into place and go, I hear everything you're saying, my husband, I hear everything you're saying, my spouse. And maybe we can just vote at the booth and just not talk about it. And again, that's not going to work for everybody. But if it is going to work for you, and only you know, that is an option.
Yeah.
That is absolutely
Now,
an option.
if a woman in that situation, this would be rare, I think, but if there was a woman in that situation that had like a lot of spunk to her and was willing to really stick her neck out, she could say, you know what? I'm going to vote this way. You're going to vote that way. Let's just not vote because we're going to cancel each other out anyway. And then she could sneak off a vote.
You're bad.
He won't know. Then he won't ask because he thought both of them didn't vote.
You are bad. But there's nothing saying you couldn't vote on another day. You don't have to make a big announcement. Oh, I'm going and voting today. You don't have to do any of that. I mean, you just go vote.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily recommend that you go be deceitful to your husband, but
it's a fun idea that came up.
You do. This is, to me, my wife and I were just talking about this last night. To me, this is the most important election in my lifetime.
Yeah, I agree. Now, there have been other times in the past where people have said that, but I really do feel like this is different.
Yeah, I've thought that there were things that were really important, like when I voted against Reagan. I thought that was really important. There are other situations I thought were really important. But I don't believe that we've ever been in a point in history, at least in my lifetime, where the choice between one president or another is the choice between potentially having a lot more rights taken away. I mean, a lot, and potentially our democratic republic being destroyed because there's a desire to put a tyrannical dictator in place, i.e. Donald Trump.
Yep.
And so anything that you can do to get out and vote while we still have our voting rights, while we have them here. And I'm sorry, if people want to say, well, you're just being dramatic, I don't think so.
It's not. He said it out loud. I mean, that's the thing I don't understand. I don't know if they just don't get to see those clips of him saying that, but they don't believe him.
They don't believe him.
They don't believe him?
No,
they believe him on everything else.
No, I've seen people when they're like, well, here, I'll show you a clip. And they're like, it's AI. He didn't really say that. Or he didn't really mean that, which of course they said during the entire his presidency. Right. Oh, he doesn't really mean what he says. Well, we now know he not only means what he says, he means things he doesn't say either.
Right. Yeah.
And they're all bad.
Yeah.
For social, because there were a couple of things I heard that Trump did that were beneficial. Not many, most of them only beneficial for the wealthy. But what he wants to do to the country, his promise, he followed through on his promise to get rid of Roe v. Wade. He did. And now he's saying he's going to handle it so we don't ever have to vote again. I'm sorry, take him at his word.
Yep.
You either vote now or you never vote again. There you go. Because if only 50% of the country shows up, he is going to win. We have to have at least 60% of the country to show up to ensure that she will win. And anything over 60%, she wins. Because her ideals and the ideals that aren't his, that aren't Trump's, are what a majority of the country wants.
Yes. And really probably even more of a majority than what would be reported because so many people are misled about some of her ideals or some of her policies. And so they're not going to say that they would agree with them because they're just, the wool is pulled over their eyes kind of thing. But in reality, if you sat down with them and didn't put a name to the policy, they would be on board.
Oh, and there's a perfect example of this. I can't remember his name. Maybe it was Walter Matheson. I'm not sure. But there was somebody going out and what he would do is go into rallies and talk to the people and he would give them a quote, and he'd say, Biden said such and such. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, what do you think about that? Oh, that's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. Well, you know what? Actually, Trump said that. When? When did he say such a thing? Let me see. And then show him a video like, AI, I don't believe that stuff. We've all, and yet we've all seen the same clips. Before AI had really taken over. And I just can't. So go out and vote, please.
Yes. Yeah, and there was some other discussion. I think it was just some comments, replies to somebody's post on Facebook that I was looking at the other day, that, or maybe even an interview on TV, I can't remember, where they were talking about how ineffective and oh no, it was something I heard earlier today, something about Joe Biden, how long he'd been in government, and he's done absolutely nothing the whole time he's been there. And I thought, well, no, that's not true.
Well, that's because that is a Fox News talking point or a Newsmax talking point.
But I thought, how could they even come up with that? And I thought, so I tried to put myself in their shoes and like, how do you even attempt to believe that? And I thought, oh, maybe because most of the stuff that he's been involved with over the course of his career was not necessarily focused at improving the lives of wealthy white men. So if you're a wealthy white man, you could look at a lot of Democratic presidents, not just him,
and say that is
years ago, they haven't done anything.
Yep.
But if you talk to anyone who's in a minority, they can tell you for hours what these people have done that have made their lives better. And maybe not as much some of the younger generations, because they just assume things have always been this way. But anyone who's been around for a while can tell you there's been some significant social change in this. Yeah. And that's part of why I thought it was interesting to talk about the voters or the Equal Rights for Women Voting Act, the 19th Amendment, because that obviously predated either of us. And so when you grow up in a world that already had that existing, it's hard to imagine why it wasn't just always there.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it should have just been there the whole time.
It does.
So there's plenty of other things, people that, even young kids today that are either Hispanic or Black or gay or whatever, when they already have all these rights, the right to marry who they want, the right to own property, all these rights that seem pretty fundamental. And it's hard, you'd have to like scratch your head and go, now, why would I have not been able to do that before? It's hard for them to even believe that was never there. So that's the thing, I guess, with making sure that information like this, historical information, gets to stay, for example, in schools. And we don't ban the books that talk about things that happened back before this generation knew what was what, because they don't know that there's a bad thing we could go back to. You know what I mean?
Well, that's, that goes back to the banning of books and the changes in the educational sector. They don't want the kids to know how bad it was, so they can easily change people's minds and kind of lead them around by the nose, and keep the power they way that they want to. And this whole Project 2025, which I know they then changed to Amendment 47, and then to something else they called the first 30 days or first 100 days, whatever they're calling it. It's all the same.
Yeah.
And it's all to take our rights away and put it in the hands of just a few, and which, I mean, really, it's already like that in a lot of ways. But this would be an obliteration of so many rights.
Yeah.
So let's not do that.
Yeah. Right. And I will say, I've been pretty happy to see, it's been a week now since the DNC finished. And it still feels like a pretty strong wave of positive support for things going
I'll
on there.
tell
Don't you
you,
think?
that was fun, Jenny.
It was.
That was so fun. I think I was telling you when you were here because it was so fun having you here on the last night.
Yeah.
So glad you came by. And came by like she's right down the street. She lives in Florida and we're in North Carolina. So it was a really big deal. It was so fun that she was here,
Right.
her and Jason. And I have to admit, I have never watched all 4 days of any DNC, RNC, anything, any kind of convention. I watched 4 days. And I've certainly never invited anybody to, hey, you want to come watch the DNC with me?
Right.
You know, I mean, you guys were coming over, and Myra and I were like, well, we really want to watch the DNC. And I said, well, we still are. We still are.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, what about them? And I said, well, I'm pretty sure they'll watch it with us. But if not, they have their own TV. I'm like, this is what we're watching.
Yeah.
Like, that came out of my mouth. I mean, and I would dare say 10 years ago, you could not have called me political at all. But so much has happened over the last 10 years. I can't help but be political. And I think in order to conserve our freedoms, it's really, really important for us to all wake up and see what's happening if we don't pay attention.
Yeah.
And I think a huge part of that, oh my gosh, it's finally stopped. I just realized that it's calm here. There's no more storms.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And see, and I lost my train of thought again. I'm so sorry.
Well, it's important for us to stay involved in the process, or it's just going to like spin away from us and we won't have any input anymore.
And then it's not just about the major, the presidential race. Yes, it's important for you to vote there, but it's important all the way down. It's important all the way down. I mean, there's only so much that Harrison Walz can do if they have a divided house.
Right.
So,
we're going back. All circles back around.
We went full circle.
Yeah. Well, and another thing that this is a little bit of a different topic to even get kicked off now, but another thing that is, I don't know, odd to me, and I wish we would just get rid of it, is the whole electoral college thing, because popular vote is how this country started. Now, it wasn't everybody's vote at that point, but it was still just each vote counts for that person. Each person gets one vote. Everybody's vote.
And I know the argument against it. I understand the argument against it, but because there's large swaths of land that don't get counted as much if we do the popular vote, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Yes. But so you're saying one farm land owner out in Nebraska should have as many votes as a small city in California? I mean, that's just nuts. That's just nuts. So I understand that if somebody is going to come back and say, yes, but the Electoral College gives equal representation, my answer to that is no, it doesn't.
Right.
It may have at one point. It may have when it was enacted, but there are so many more people, and there's such a vast difference in the distribution of people, and the Electoral College has not caught up.
Right.
There should be a lot more representation for some states than there is now in the current system in the Electoral College. So if we're not going to disband it, which I completely agree we should, if it's not going to be disbanded, it needs to at least be brought up to date so that the representation is actually accurate.
And honestly, I don't know if there are any other countries, any other democratic countries that actually have a vote who use that kind of system. I believe everywhere else it's just
that's because the whole reason the Electoral College started was partially because of land ownership, but the other part of that was because they didn't want poor people to vote and screw up who was supposed to be the president. so that the Electoral College could pick the president if they didn't like who people were picking. And yeah, fun stuff.
Yeah.
Racism. It's almost the answer to everything in our history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, isms in general. Yeah.
Isms. Yeah.
Because that just adds another layer of potential corruption, right? They talk about,
Yes.
fair and free election. Well, yeah, but if the electors are somehow going to make up their own minds and decide to vote differently than what the whole population that they're representing voted, like, how the heck is that free and fair? And I have heard, I don't know if you've seen, I think it was Rachel Maddow was talking about concerns that somehow Trump has influenced who there are new electors or something that have been put in place
That are loyal,
around the country.
loyalists.
Yeah. And, if something like that happens, I mean, we can't.
There will be an uprising if
allow
that
that to
happens.
happen.
There's too many people who are thinking positive. There are too many people, like you said, we're still feeling that wave of energy from the DNC. It has not stopped. We were just on a call last night. It was Cooking for Kamala. It was Cooking for Kamala is what it was called.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all of these chefs from around the country that got on the call and just started doing a cooking show, and they were raising money for.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so we watched that last night. You had to get approved to be a part of it, and so Myra had her approval, and we watched this, and they raised almost $250,000 last night just from these chefs,
Mm-hmm.
and the people that were watching them cook. So there's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of hope, and hope wins. Hope wins, love wins, happiness wins. So come November, if something were to happen where a loyalist or loyalists made that kind of change, I think we're in a different place now than if they had that had happened 4 years ago, even.
I hope,
or a year ago. I think if that were to happen now, there are too many of us that have woken up.
Well, but are there things in place legally that would allow for that to be corrected? That's my concern.
Don't know, but people can certainly correct it. If there's enough of an uprising, it'll change. So, but hopefully that will not be the case. I don't think he has nearly as many loyalists as he thinks.
Yeah, I agree with that too. But that's, just the whole Electoral College thing. Like I said, that it's just a whole nother layer of potential corruption and fuck ups versus just the popular vote. Just count them and that's it. And I know it won't. We've got to be far from getting that removed, because if you go back and look at just the popular vote, it's been decades since a Republican has won the popular vote. So you're not going to get
that's
them.
Part of their reasoning behind a lot of, the gerrymandering and the trickery and the lies and Fox News and goes on and on and on. So
I think gerrymandering, that whole thing is a mess too. I don't understand why that's necessary. It is necessary
in order to manipulate. That's exactly why it's necessary, to manipulate and to control the elections. That's absolutely why it's in place. Why it's allowed to be in place is the better question.
Right.
Why the hell is that allowed to be in place?
Yeah, exactly.
Because we need a voting rights bill.
Yeah,
that's why. But we are super excited. We have was it next week? Wait a minute, is it next week?
Next week we are going to talk about, right now the Paralympics are going on. So we're going to do a little kind of summary of some of the inspirational stories that come out of the Paralympics, because quite obviously people that have had some kind of injury or disability put on them, for them to overcome that and unleash themselves from how that was kind of holding them back, or maybe had them down thinking they couldn't do what they used to do. And then to be able to come back and actually go to the Paralympics and have success is, inspirational. Many inspirational stories come out of the Paralympics. Yeah. So Looking forward to doing a little wrap up or summary of that next week. And then the following week is when we will have Jennifer Cleveland on, who will be talking about, she's an advocate for blindness. She was a sighted person for most of her life. I can't remember how long ago that she became legally blind, and she'll tell you more of her story, but she's really had to overcome a lot there to get back into being, a very productive member of society as a legally blind person representing blind people. And there's an event coming up that she's going to talk about as well. So we got the next few weeks already set, which is great for us, because usually we're like, crap, what are we going to talk about next week?
It's very exciting.
We're starting to get ahead of the game now.
Yeah, we're working on it. We're getting better. So if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please tell your friends. And if you have a topic you'd like for us to talk about or a question, you go to our website, unleashedafpodcast.com. Go to the WWJDD section. What would Jenny?
Yeah.
do? What would Jenny and Deidre do? And we also have a section there. If you'd like to be a guest on the pod, please go ahead and put your information in and we'll get back to you. And yeah, you have anything else you want to say, Jenny, before we do our outro?
I don't think so. Just looking forward to next week and continuing this wave of excitement about hopefully what's going to happen in November.
Yay! Our rights stay intact. Let's go.
Right.
All right.
I think we know what we're going to talk about that week on the podcast too.
I do believe. Colbert. Just kidding.
I'm done trying to live up to others' expectations. Family, society, class, race, sex, or religions. It's time to break free from the isms that make us feel